All right, Annie Koutrakis, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Like I was telling you before we recorded, I know exactly what half an hour means in a campaign, or whatever, 20, 40 minutes, whatever. I don't know however long this is going to take. We'll try and keep it short, but I know exactly what that time represents during a campaign. So I really, really appreciate the time that you're taking.
Thank you so much, George, for having me on your show. I look forward to our conversation. And yes, you're right. In business, I always just say time is money. Now, during the campaign, I say, time equals votes. So
Exactly.
being, going out there and making sure that the community is engaged and, getting out there and spreading the word and, just reminding people the good work that I've tried to do as a rookie MP. Yeah.
It's funny. It's funny that you mentioned the rookie MP, and I want to talk about that because this is, like you said, it's your first mandate, rookie mandate, and it happened with so many obstacles, so many, so much adversity. I remember the 2019 election. You came in at a time like it was maybe 1 or 2 weeks before the start of the campaign. There was a lot of controversy because Justin Trudeau had put out the incumbent MP at that time, and you came in. So there was an issue over there. I know that there was a problem with the local association. For those who don't know, federally, they control the funds for a campaign. So there was a little bit of a roadblock over there. Definitely not the way you want to start in politics. And then as soon as the election ends, you come in, it's your first mandate, and then boom, COVID-19 happens, and you're found to be part of a government that has to deal with one of the biggest health crises that we've seen in at least our recent history. Take us back.
Yeah.
Yeah, take us back to this first mandate. Like, what do you take away from it?
You know what? If there was ever a steep learning curve and where I had to hit the ground running real quickly, it was my experience as a rookie MP and how I was introduced to the next leg of my journey called life. Yeah, it was unfortunate that my nomination came in or was announced the way that it was. There was controversy surrounding the previous MP in the Vimy riding, but it had nothing to do with me. I was announced, the party nominated me officially September 8th, and the writ for the elections of 2019 was dropped on September 11th. At that point, I didn't have a campaign manager. I didn't have volunteers. I didn't have, an office, a campaign office. So, just to circle back to the controversy, one good thing came out of that. My name became well known nationally from coast to coast to coast simply because of the story on the Globe and Mail. And so, I quickly became known, maybe not for all the reasons that I wanted to be known, introduced as a rookie MP or a first time candidate. But hey, you take, the publicity any way you can, really. Um, for me, 2019 was such a change in my life. 2019 was a big year for me professionally. In March 2019, I had received a great promotion at the company that I was working, having gone from, assistant branch manager to vice president branch manager. I was managing teams of, portfolio managers, more than 100. Then, I don't know how many people who are listening to us will know I was elected a few months after that in June in 2019 as the first woman for the Hellenic Greater Montreal presidency. And that was such a great honor for me. I was so excited. I had my plan in place. I was going to, share with our community the vision. And then I had, a meeting that changed my life in July of 2019. And hence, as a result of that meeting, I had, became the candidate and went on to win in October 2019. being a rookie MP is, and especially with COVID having hit us, I didn't have the opportunity to learn from, MPs that had been there, colleagues for a long time. Because, when you're in Ottawa and you visit the lobby in the House, there's so much exchange and so many, great, valuable learnings that you could, tap on a minister's shoulder and say, hey, how did you handle this? This is, one of the issues that is really an issue for me in Vimy. I didn't have that opportunity, so everything was on Zoom. Everything changed. A few months later, on the personal side, I lost my mom. It was quite sudden in March 2020. So my mom passed away March 4th, 2020, and then we had the lockdown of March 13th. I did not go back to the House until probably the last week in the first week in December, actually, and before we rose for the Christmas holiday. So as you can imagine, so many, having come from the corporate world into a new world and having to deal with, a change in life, losing my mom. And I'm an only child, George. So, as an only child, losing your mom and, my father is going to be 90 next month. So talk about sandwich generation, right?
Right. Right.
A lot of challenges.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I've spent a lot of time around politicians and especially new politicians coming in. And one of the main challenges for new politicians is this sudden change in their lifestyle where they have to abandon their life in whatever city or district they're from, go to the parliament. I mean, in your case, to think that there's people coming from all across the country. We're lucky because Ottawa isn't that far, right? But there are people that are coming all the way from BC, the northern part of Canada. So, and the experience that I have is that a lot of these individuals have had a hard time coping with this sudden change in their lifestyle. It's difficult to see it positively because, you're dealing with COVID-19 and you have all these things to deal with. But at the same time, the fact that, especially for people like you who were rookies in this first mandate, you didn't have to really feel this abrupt change in your lifestyle because you had that opportunity to work from home. Do you think that pretty much helped you kind of ease through this transition? The fact that you were in a much more comfortable setting and there were all these solutions that suddenly had to pop up in order to make sure that your job was going to be accomplished?
Actually, that's a great question, George, because I thought about that. Yes, I think in many ways, having the opportunity to work from home made me a more effective and a more efficient rookie MP, I would say, because fortunately, I was able to set up my constituency office because I moved it. So as soon as we set it up at the end of January, early February of 2020, my team was in place. I have an amazing team. I have a team of about 6 people. 2 of them look after immigration cases only, and everyone else is pretty much, helping me to be, as the best MP as I can be. Having been able to work from home, I was more present because, technology affords you that. I'm also a member of the finance committee. So last summer, not this current summer, but last summer, we were dealing with, the We Charity. Being a member of the finance committee, I didn't stop working at all. We were working, sometimes 6-7 hours a day, 5 days a week, just to get through that. Yeah. So I think, it did afford me a work-life balance. I know that for many of my colleagues, as you mentioned, from out west, oftentimes parliamentarians have said, maybe the House shouldn't be sitting on the Monday or the Friday, because many of those people, when the House is in session and they have to return home every weekend. Could you imagine having to fly out, Sunday night for many of them, or Sunday afternoon, only to go back, sometimes the end of the week on a Friday and come back on a Sunday. So I think in many ways, as challenging as it was not to be able to work physically together with our teams and our colleagues, I think that for me, it was a blessing. in many ways as well, because, I was able to have the support of my spouse who, Jerry, he's retired. And I mean, he eats policy. So if there was anybody that felt so supported, by someone who lives with me, is me. So, in that regard, yes, I was very lucky in that way.
Let's talk a little bit about the elections. Your party is getting widely criticized for launching a campaign at the beginning of what seems to be a fourth wave. What are you telling your constituents? I mean, you mentioned that you're going around and meeting as many people as possible. It's obviously what you need to do during a campaign. What are you telling them, especially the constituents that are wondering if this is the responsible thing to be doing right now?
You're right. And that is one of the questions. And the thing that I share with them is my experience, in my committee work. The truth of the matter is, and anyone that's, politically active like you and me, minority governments typically last anywhere between 15 and 18 months. So we're at about 19 months. So, we've surpassed. Initially with the COVID, I have to tell you, I was quite impressed to see how everybody, all the parties together, it was a Team Canada effort, and we were able to step up and, roll out the support programs that Canadians needed most. I mean, everybody was afraid. They were afraid for their families, health, and security first most. As time went by, though, COVID became quite politicized. And unfortunately, committees stopped working. The parliament stopped working. If you recall, budget 2021, and we worked very hard on the finance committee to make sure that we were able to, present our report to the House of Commons for debate and to vote it through so that it goes to the Senate for further debate before it receives royal assent. And I mean, there was so much filibustering, there was so many delays, debates on issues that, Canadians really did not vote us to go there to waste time. They voted us to go to the House to work for them. And if we don't pass a budget, I mean, forget about, any emergency support programs. All other programs that have been in place stop as well, because you don't have the right as a government to continue, paying out programs. The budget then becomes the law, as you know. So the budget was only voted in through the House on June 23rd, which was the last day. So when you see how quickly it deteriorated, the work atmosphere and the important work that we have to do, well, how much longer can a minority government with this kind of toxic work environment continue? I mean, nothing was getting done.
Yeah, you mentioned about politicizing the pandemic. I think I've definitely seen this, but am I wrong to assume that your party is pushing hard at making the management of this pandemic the ballot question?
I wouldn't say that, George. I think that it's one of the questions. I mean, we're very cognizant of the fact that there's a fourth wave. We're very cognizant that many different groups are hesitant in getting the vaccination, or, there's a lot of false information, unfortunately, out there, about masks and vaccines and, and all of that. But, first and foremost, we have to make sure that we continue the message that we need to get as many Canadians as possible vaccinated if we're going to beat this COVID. I mean, the truth of the matter is COVID is here to stay. I'm sure you've heard many researchers say, it's going to be with us. We may need booster shots. It may be like the flu. And unfortunately, there's a lot of misinformation. So I don't think that it's a key platform issue, but I don't think that we have to stop reminding all Canadians that, we need to do what needs to be done, not only to protect ourselves, but more importantly, to protect others. For myself, like I said, my father's 90 years old. I can't afford not being doubly vaccinated and or people who are visiting him. He's at home in his residence, and that was a cognizant decision on us and our family. We didn't want to put him in a residence, and I'm glad we didn't. First of all, it's not culturally for many of us sound either. I mean, that's not something I wanted for my father. But could you imagine how many other people don't have the opportunity to allow for their seniors, their elderly parents to stay in their homes?
Right.
So do we want to continue endangering their lives? Do we want to get back to our lives, semi-normal? I don't know what normal will look like, again, to be honest with you, but that's my personal opinion. That's all I could say really about that. I don't think it's a political platform position, but I think that we owe it to all Canadians to keep giving them the information that they need to make well-informed decisions.
Let's talk a little bit about Quebec, since obviously that's the region that you're getting elected in. Your party obviously wants to obtain a majority government. I mean, that's what everyone is campaigning for. It was announced from the beginning that you want a clear mandate to pursue your program. Quebec is once again, I think, going to play a crucial role in determining if whether or not you can get that majority. And I think that you can't really afford to lose any seats here. And in fact, I think you need to make certain gains as well in Quebec. What's the game plan here in Quebec, especially considering that the Conservatives will be mailing every Quebecer what they call their contract, which essentially gives into every single request that the Premier Legault made, while your party is heavily criticized by Quebec politicians, especially for overstepping your jurisdictions with new announcements that that were made recently for what they believe are done for electoral purposes. We're talking about hiring more doctors, hiring more support personnel in long-term care facilities, and assuring that they get $25 minimum in terms of their wage, affordable daycare services, all these things that have to do with provincial jurisdiction. What's the game plan for Quebec?
Well, listen, Quebecers know and they recognize how hard the federal government has been working to make sure that they have the supports that they need. We will continue to do that, George. We have great conversations. The Prime Minister has been having conversations. His cabinet ministers on all these various portfolios that you just mentioned have been having great weekly conversations with their counterparts on the provincial side. We announced $6 billion being transferred over the next 5 years to the province of Quebec to help them with the childcare. I mean, Quebec is a great role model for affordable daycare. I mean, a lot of the other programs, the program that we're saying for across Canada is being modeled after the Quebec model. So 100%. That was very welcomed by Premier Legault.
It was welcome primarily also because he got that money without any conditions. So I mean, I know that they came out yesterday and announced 9,000 spots. I mean, this is provincial, so I don't expect you to comment on it, but we know that we need 50,000 spots because that's what the waiting lists are. So we need to fix that kind of yesterday. The $6 billion that was sent by the federal government was sent without any conditions. So we don't know if indeed that money will serve for the daycares. We don't know. I mean, many think that it was just a blank check that you just sent over to Quebec. At the same time, just to go back to the health industry, you're announcing more, hiring more doctors. Like, people are wondering, and this came out yesterday with Quebec's opposition politicians wondering how can the Liberal Party of Canada make these announcements when they're not really able to do any of it in our jurisdiction.
Well, we're announcing programs that Canadians have told us over the last 19 months and since 2015 that is what they expect their governments to be supporting them with. We all saw what happened with long-term care during COVID. I mean, if anything, COVID was able to demonstrate to us the cracks in the various systems. In the House of Commons, both the Conservatives and the Bloc Québécois were always asking for more transfers into the health system. Well, here we go. We're starting to show that we heard the message. Yes, there's a need for more money in the health sector, and that is what we are doing. So, when the federal government is in conversations with their counterparts in the provinces, and especially with the province of Quebec, I'd like to believe that, in good faith, that the money that is being transferred by the federal government to the province of Quebec will be spent where it's geared to. We need to continue the dialogue. We need to understand one another. And I truly believe that the Prime Minister and the Health Minister and the Quebec province, the government, is doing just that. I mean, this time in the election in 2019, the relationship between the province of Quebec, the government, which was, again, Premier Legault, was a little bit different. This time around, I think that we can all see that the relationship has matured. And I think we've all learned through that experience. And I would like to think that the money that is being transferred and being announced as part of our program and our platform is going to be spent where it's supposed to be spent.
Right. I know that. You said that you sat on the finance committee. Many find that your party isn't talking much about the economy. There isn't much information out there yet. I know it's something probably maybe coming in the next couple of days in the campaign. So, I mean, we have record-breaking deficits, record-breaking national debt. Our central bank announced last week an inflation rate of the 3.7%. They're projecting it to climb to 3.9 by the end of the third quarter. I'm not so sure that we can safely say that things are going well economically right now. And to add fuel to the fire, Justin Trudeau stated last week that the last thing on his mind was caring about monetary policy, heavily criticized on that. A lot of analysts think that was a huge blunder that caused that gap that you had in advance to the Conservative parties was caused to drop significantly. At the same time, since 2015, our finance ministers haven't been able to project the zero deficit. Meanwhile, the parliamentary budget officer, in a recent report, he stated that we shouldn't be expecting balanced books before 2070. Is there anything that you can share on the plan to get our public finances back in order?
Well, I know that is top of mind as well, George. I mean, obviously, our deputy prime minister and our finance minister is very cognizant of the fact and of the spending. And, but we decided as a party and as a government that the real issue, the most urgent issue right now, especially in the COVID pandemic area where everything shut down, this was not the time to go into austerity. This was the time to spend and make sure that all Canadians were kept safe, secure. They had money to put food on the table, and they had, a roof over their head. This was not the time to look at how we were going to slash programs and not spend. This was the time to give the support to all Canadians. The Canadian government, thankfully, we're a sovereign nation, and we're responsible for our own monetary policy. Of all the G7 countries, we have the healthiest balance sheet. The economy is at 99% of where it was pre-COVID. And oftentimes when I have this conversation with people, the economy is coming back and roaring strong. The economy is going to take care of all of those lapses. The inflationary period that you mentioned, that's only temporary. We've had the Bank of Canada, the governor of the Bank of Canada on. We had, people from the OECD, analysts who look at, Canada was one of the countries. In fact, that was a witness that I had reached out to and said, would you be able to come and be a witness on the finance committee and talk to us a little bit about how Canada has performed and how we've handled the COVID crisis and where we are economically. So, we've been given top marks, George. We continue to have AAA bond ratings. We haven't lost our bond rating. That is crucial for a country because that shows, we can go out and borrow money at preferential interest rates. the amount of money that we're paying now to cover interest payments is much lower than it was pre-COVID, because we're able to borrow at a much lesser rate. So my message to Canadians is, yes, keep the eye. And I know our government is keeping their eye on the ball for the debt and the deficit, but now is not the time for a country like ours with a strong economy to be looking at, programs to be slashed. Where are you going to slash from? There are people that still haven't gone back to work. A lot of people are saying, oh, small businesses, every time they see me, they complain, oh, the government did a great job, but look, we can't find workers. And this is mostly in the restaurant, service industry. Well, I can tell you, George, my family comes from a restaurant business background. I grew up in the restaurant business. My father owned a business in Vimy. I could remember way back in 77 and 80 where people were complaining they couldn't find workers. The truth of the matter is, in small businesses and in restaurants, they had that issue already. So for the few that are still on the CRB collecting $300, I would like to think that the ones that are there that are still collecting it are people who really need it, and not people taking advantage of a system. As much of the criticism is that we're giving out money so people can remain lazy and stay home. I don't think that that's the case at all. And if it is, it's a very small percentage, and we shouldn't paint everybody with the same brush.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about the situation in the Eastern Mediterranean. I mean, we're both of Greek origin. I know that you were following those developments quite closely. Where does Canada stand with, the issue in that part of the world? I mean, there's been very little coming from Justin Trudeau and from foreign ministers, Champagne before, and now Marc Garneau. And for the people listening or watching that are perhaps unaware, we're talking about a conflict in the region of Artsakh, between Azerbaijan and Armenia, where we discovered that there was Canadian imagery technology found on Turkish drones. Everyone thought that Canada was respecting an arms embargo with Turkey. Finally, we realized that there was an exemption on that sort of technology. And even with that exemption, it wasn't supposed to leave Turkey. Meanwhile, it was used in that conflict, only later to find out that Canada backtracked on that exemption and canceled it after all, the bloodshed over there. We're talking about Turkey's attempt to flood Europe through Greece with Islamist militia coming out of Syria. We're talking about Turkey's, multiple violations of Greek airspace and territorial waters. We're talking about, very recently, Turkey's unilateral decision to open the Cypriot region of Varosha, despite the fact that that's forbidden under United Nations Security Council resolutions. And, now we find out that there's a permanent drone base that will be developed in that region, which, in addition to threatening Cyprus and Greece, of course, can also potentially threaten countries in the Middle East and North Africa, like Israel, Egypt, and Libya. I know last week Reuters was reporting that Turkey has now taken over Kabul airport, and they're planning on negotiating with the Taliban regime to maintain the security and control of that airport. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't think I know of any other country that has control of another sovereign nation's airport. First time I hear of that. So where do we stand? Do you think amongst your colleagues there's any comprehension on how delicate that region has become and how easily it could get destabilized, even with the slightest escalation?
Great question, and I wish I was the Minister of Global Affairs and would be able to give you firsthand information as to what our policy is or what our. All I can tell you is yes, being an MP of Hellenic origin, I'm very sensitive to those issues. We also discussed it recently. I was one of the 3 lucky Canadians that was able to travel to Greece at the Hellenic Interparliamentarian Association. And Turkey is an issue. And Turkey is an issue for the allies. And I know that there are ongoing conversations amongst Canada and its allies. I think you can appreciate that, Canada doesn't have the defense power, if you will, or resources that someone like the U.S. has. So obviously, the U.S., it's easier for them to be outspoken and take a position and say we're against that because they're in a very different situation.
I also find it. I also find it's a matter of principle as well, despite the fact that obviously our defense isn't anything equal to the U.S. A lot of the statements that I saw coming out of Canada, whether it was Justin Trudeau or the foreign ministers that have covered that period, whether it was Mr. Champagne or Mr. Garneau now, it's all along the lines of, Turkey is a key partner. It's a NATO ally, and we have to maintain the relationships. It's always along those lines rather than, putting our foot down and establishing what is the right thing to do and what is the wrong thing that has been happening.
And I agree with you, George. And some of the comments that I myself voiced time and time again was, yes, they're allies. I'm not so sure what kind of a NATO ally Turkey is, given its position and always trying to destabilize the region. But at some point, you have to be on the right side of history. And I have to tell you, there were. Just to circle back to the drones and the RTAC issue, I remember personally having a conversation with Minister Champagne and telling him, Minister, you have to really look into that because if the suspicions are correct that Canadian made lenses are in those drones and they caused harm to civilians, then we need to really look at that and see whether we should be making more exemptions. And he told me that before that exemption was made, there was 9 months. It took them 9 months to do their due diligence but you know what? At the end of the day, we don't know what Turkey is going to be doing with it. I mean, we did what we had to do when we were looking at whether to give the exemption or not. The fact that it wound up doing harm is very regrettable for me. And I voiced that opinion as well. But, George, it's not always easy. You think you're doing the right thing and then, something bad comes, unfortunately.
Let's wrap it up. I know that you have a campaign to get back to.
Yeah, thank you.
Talk to me about Vimy. What's happening on the ground? What are some challenges that need to be addressed? Should you win again on September the 20th? Any words you want to share with your constituents?
Sure. I've been doing a lot of work, great work actually, for income inequality and disadvantaged youth. Unfortunately, Vimy is a riding that struggles with high levels of income inequality and disadvantaged youth. And this obviously became even more apparent during the COVID-19. I was visiting some centers last week, actually, and they told me that in all of Quebec, Vimy is the most disadvantaged area. It's the area or the riding with the most newly immigrants and refugees. So obviously their needs are very different. The average income in Vimy is $54,000, whereas if you look at neighboring, ridings in Laval, it's upwards of 70. So there's a huge disadvantage. So I'm doing a lot of work for the disadvantaged. I did a lot of work. I was able to secure monies for women's shelters that are in Vimy. Just 2 shelters alone received $4.7 million to go forward with their phase 2. These are, home shelters that I don't even know their addresses. That's how secretive they are. So those are some of the things that I've been working on. I have a lot of seniors, so I've been working hard, making sure that seniors have what they need. Small businesses. Vimy is the heart of Laval. There's I have industrial, I have biotech, I have retail, a lot of small businesses, marginalized, very diverse. So I've been trying to reach out to all the various communities and make sure that I'm there and that I, try to make my voice really strong in the caucus and to the ministers and make sure that, they're going to have the supports that they need to continue doing the good work. There's a lot of not-for-profit organizations in Vimy that work really, really well with the youth and the seniors and young families. So, doing what all MPs do, trying to deliver the message and say, listen, I'm here, I'm listening, give me your ideas so I can take them back to, Ottawa, hopefully for a second mandate and continue the good work. I received great comments so far. Especially for my team in the constituency office. So I'm there to serve, George, in the best way that I can, and hopefully I'll be given a second mandate.
Fantastic. Annie, thanks again for coming on. Good luck with the rest of the campaign. Maybe I'll be running into you. Who knows?
Yeah, why not? It will be a pleasure. Let's keep in touch.
All right, Annie, take care. Good luck.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.